Tiago, welcome. Thank you for joining me from Portugal, from your wonderful, beautiful vineyards. I'm really, really sorry that I cannot be there with you. I wish I was. But listen, thank you very much. And please, I give you the scene and introduce yourself and your family for us.
Thanks, Axel, and thanks for the invitation. It's always wonderful to join you. Not physically this time, but hopefully we'll have many other chances in a hopefully near future. So we've been here in the Douro Valley now for 5 generations already, the family, and most of the families of grape growers in the Douro Valley, our tradition was to make port out of our vineyards that we will then sell in bulk to the classic port merchants. So that was pretty much the model of production and of business in the Douro Valley for ages, basically. When we got to the end of the 80s, port trade was passing through some challenging times. The prices were going down. The quantity that we could vinify as port from our vineyards was also decreasing because, basically every year the Portuguese government sets the quantity that we can make of port out of our vineyards. And we got to a point that it was pretty much already less than a half of the production of the vineyard. So of course that it was very challenging because on one hand, we're in this fantastic, beautiful region, but at the same time that it's very, very challenging and tough to work. So the production costs are naturally very, very high. And we had just half of our production being reasonably well valued as port. And almost the other half was, as they didn't have the rights to make port, which was pretty much the core of the region. So those remaining grapes didn't have almost any value. So we had to do something. So basically, by my father Domingos and some of his friends and colleagues were these pioneers that said that we have to do something about this, otherwise it wouldn't be sustainable for a region like this to keep it as it is. So if we cannot make port out of those remaining vineyards, let's try to do something else, because again, we're in such a fantastic region with so much diversity, so much different conditions, that eventually we could do other kinds of wine. So that was how the region evolved from being only focusing on port to all these new wines that you can find nowadays in the Douro Valley. Never forgetting port, of course, but now exploring its fantastic terroir in a totally different extent.
Okay, and so this is the one that started in your family in 1999, right?
It was slightly before even so, Akor, sorry. So it was, the first, we had a kind of like a 0 year, which was 1991 with the Val de Raposa white. So that was pretty much like an experiment. And we started with a white, which was curious because we're in a region that even today it's better known for port, of course, and for reds. But we always had at Caivosa, Val de Raposa, a very big tradition with white. So 91 with a white Val de Raposa, and then 92 was our official debut premiere with our first Quinta da Caivosa red, and also Val de Raposa. So 92 was pretty much the official beginning for our Douro wine work, basically.
And the first time you made port under your own label?
Under our own label, it's true. It was 99, so it was with a very, very special LBV from 99, and it seems curious that it took all that long, because again, we've been doing port already for 5 generations now, but we were doing it in collaboration or for the port merchants, and so as we always had this big collaboration with them. And even when we were already doing our own Douro wines, we were still actually supplying grapes to some of the big players in the port market. We have to admit that there was always a concern to respect also that relationship that we had with those port traders. So that made us not move right away into port with our own label, but always having in mind that that will be the natural evolution. So after some years devoted, or officially more devoted to Douro still wines, we finally had the chance in '99 to start with our LBV, and from after that it was step by step developing the port range that we have nowadays. So 2003 we released our first vintage port with the family's own name, Quinta da Gaivota Vintage Porto 3, and from then on, the 10-year-old Townie, 20-year-old Townie, and so on and so on. So with the white parts always with a big highlight, as well as it is something very very dear to our family. So we have now a very complete range of ports, only focusing on the special categories. There's already a lot of people doing more like commercial entry level ports, so and that's fine, but we think that we can with the vineyards that we have, as we don't buy any grapes, we don't buy any wine, so it's all coming from our family's own vineyards. So I think that we have indeed the chance to take it to already to a very special level.
Okay, and just give me an idea. Have you guys acquired any new vineyards in the last 2 decades? I know that you have now a state-of-the-art winery that you finished a few years ago, and which I'm yet to see, unfortunately. But yeah, just give us a little bit perspective on the investments and the developments that you guys have done in the last few decades.
Well, we've been very, very active both in the vineyards and winery, but actually first even more on the vineyards, because again, it's the core of our work. It's pretty much all our philosophy of production relies on our daily work on the vineyards. So when we first started in 91, 92, we were back then with 80 hectares under vine. So even so, we had already the chance in a region that is very divided as Douro is. So the average surface per grower in the Douro Valley is actually around 1 hectare, even below 1 hectare. So it's very fragmented. Step by step, we started to be able to either to replant or sometimes to buy a few other vineyards. So nowadays we have actually 140 hectares under vines here in the Douro Valley, which is for Douro reality quite important already, and it gives already a lot of work, as you can imagine, in this kind of conditions. And more recently, the last vineyard or Quinta that we bought was actually Quinta da Oliveirinha, which is right by the Douro River in the heart of the valley for port production, especially. So yeah, we've been always very active. We don't plan to be like growing in terms of surface and in terms of number of bottles, because I think that we're already pretty comfortable with the vineyards that we have, and we know that at the same time we have to make sure that we don't get into a scale that will make us be physically not possible to be close to the vineyard, basically. So we want to keep in a scale that allows us to be in the vineyard, visiting it, following it, as we love to do, because again, that's the essence of our work.
That's right. Thank you very much. Can you speak a few words about what makes the Douro Valley so special? Soil, microclimate, and how you cultivate the vines, because obviously everybody knows about the terraces, the famous terraces of the Douro Valley, and the enormous height difference between the level of the river and the top of the hill. So please enlighten us.
Well, Douro is a really, really extraordinary region. I think that, nature gave us at the same time a lot of challenges, but at the same time also a lot of possibilities, and it was actually very, very generous to us, because, as you can see on the back of my on my back, Well, we're in a region where most of the vineyards are in the slopes, in the mountains, basically. So we have huge diversities of different conditions. So we have well, altitudes that can go from 100 meters, 150 to 800 meters height. We have all sorts of sun exposition because, as you can imagine, with this complex topography, also you can be well like west facing, but you walk a few steps and you're already east facing instead. So well, we have vineyards that make a whole amphitheater, so where you have all sorts of different sun expositions, soil variations, and then well, thanks to this extraordinary diversity of conditions, it resulted also in a amazing diversity of indigenous grapes. So, which means that we have nowadays in the Douro Valley something like 120 indigenous grapes, 70 reds and 50 whites, which is extraordinary. So, not only we have well, nature already sending a lot of nuances, but then we have all the different expressions of all these different varieties in this amazing conditions. So it's for me as a winemaker, it's Disney World because you have so many things to play, all these different varieties, all these different conditions. So you can pretty much do almost a little bit of everything. And I think that Port was the first big revelation of this really unique region. But nowadays we're seeing that well, besides of this something that is so special as sport, we can also do other wines, and I think that there's I don't know any other region in the world that can do at the same time well something like port, like the king of fortified wines in the world, basically. But at the same time, do all sorts of still wines with a lot of character, sparkling wines, which is something that already exists, and it's one of our projects for the future as well. Whites, reds, everything basically. So it's a world of diversity.
So if you, I don't know, every wine region has something special about the soil to say, you know, what is the one in the Douro, or is it really fragmented incredibly like Tokai is, or is it like predominant like limestone in Burgundy?
Well, it's pretty dominant, and actually, well, we don't have a real soil. We have what we can call an anthropic soil. So it's literally a soil made by man, because originally we have this rock, so schist basically, and or slate. And as you know, schist is a metamorphic rock that is usually displayed like this, as you can see, so in horizontal layers. But here in the Douro Valley, with the tectonic moves, it actually became like this instead, so vertically displayed.
Oh,
So this
right.
is so it's for example, other regions with slate like Mosel still have it like this. But in the Douro, as it became well vertical instead, it means that actually, although the soils are very poor and there's very little water available, but even so, the roots can indeed develop in between rows of the slates, and to look for water and nutrients in depth. So still very difficult conditions because obviously the yields are ridiculous. We're talking about grams per vines, not kilos. It's like 100 grams, 200 grams per vines. When we see our friends from Champagne with their big yields, well, we're not jealous, but almost. Well, on a vineyard production basis, of course, because of course they produce much more, 10, 20 times more sometimes. But it's amazing to see then all the character that results from this, because well, you have a fantastic concentration but in balance. So it's not only like richness in terms of sugar content in the berries. Everything is concentrated equally, so you get a lot of depth, you get a lot of intensity, but still with balance, and you really taste the schist. And it's like we all know that minerality is one of those very controversial issues. Science doesn't cannot explain yet how the minerals from the soil or from the rock can end up in the final wine, but we feel it, and it's something that is very, very obvious many times in soils of granite, for example, in soils of schist as well. And I think that it's one of those little mysteries that vines and wines have that make us all love it so much, because in the end it's pretty much the expression of nature. It's nature expressing on its best.
So let's talk a few words about the change in the wine style since the 90s. Because initially, port red wines used to be, and whites as well, were very high in alcohol, and they were much more powerful, much stronger wines. And this is something that we have never really found in your wines, because Domingos, from the first vintages onwards, have always made very elegant, very well balanced, fresh wines. Coming white wines out at 12.5% alcohol from your estate was unheard of. You were like one of the very first ones to do this. Is it something that is due to, I mean, I know what it's due to because your father is a genius, but now a lot of your generation who are taking over the wineries, and obviously I saw that in Hungary, maybe it's different in Portugal, but your generation traveled around the world and discovered Burgundy, Bordeaux much better, worked there, did harvests in Australia, all over the world, and they come back and they say, okay, well, we would like to change a little bit the wine that was produced before. I don't know, how did this all happen in Portugal?
Well, it's pretty much the same kind of development as well, and evolution, because it's true that originally we have to admit that, well, being in a region that has such a strong sense of terroir, so that has a very, very present nature, the very, very strong terroir. Naturally, well, and at the same time, we have a wine that was well, expressing that for centuries already, which was port. Most of our colleagues, actually, when they started to do Douro wines, basically based their work in techniques that were already being used for making port. And so then you had like the food threading in the open fermenters, in the lagars. So you have uh, techniques that always lead you to a great extraction, basically, which of course for port makes sense, because we're talking about only half of a fermentation. And so during that, well, half of the time that you have to work with the solids, you have to be indeed a little bit more well, intense to make sure that you have the proper extraction. But when you apply that for a still wine that has a complete fermentation that many times requires even well, a subsequent maceration with the skin still, that could be a little bit too much. So I think that that was why in the beginning some wines in the Douro were indeed well, fruit bombs with everything out, with a lot of tannins, higher alcohol content as well. So and you'll feel that they were pretty chunky, basically, sometimes a lot of character many times, but they were well, sometimes the balance was not their nickname, basically. So with us it was different from the beginning, because Domingos had a pretty strong idea already of what he wanted to do, and at the same time, well, he wanted to learn right away. So knowing that we were starting to make a totally different kind of wine, he knew that he had to learn with people that were doing well, the best wines in the world back then, or wines with great character. So he traveled a lot to France, in particular to Bordeaux, really to, well, to learn and to inspire with the different techniques that he could then adapt to our reality. So not never thinking about copying, but learning other ways to work the vineyards for these new kinds of wines that the region was starting to do. So that was why, since the beginning, well, our wines, I think that reflected that we were doing something new in the Douro Valley, and so that it required new tools, new knowledge as well. So when we bring that together with this fantastic heritage that we have, I think that we have a recipe for great things in the future. So this new generation, I think that did pretty much what basically what Domingos did 30 years ago, which is great and fantastic because again. Um, we're in an extraordinary region that has indeed so much things to discover, but at the same time, this is also a great challenge because well, it's fantastic to have a very homogeneous area that all top quality like you find in places like Bordeaux, for example, or in other regions. Burgundy, of course, that it's a case of a very a lot of diversity of terroirs. But I think that when you step into the Douro, I have a friend that says that Douro is almost like Burgundy in 3D, basically. So with all the different altitudes and so on, it's crazy. So of course that you have to have all sorts of tools to be able to understand and to adapt. And I think that it's great that people had the chance to travel and to learn with other realities because well, this is really inspiring basically, and you learn a lot of things that you can then apply. I think that it's important to have in mind that we shouldn't even so well try to copy others, and we shouldn't just go also with the on the flavor of the day. So we can bring a lot of these ideas, but I think that we should always try to integrate it into our own traditions, into our own conditions as well, so that we get the best from both worlds. We keep evolving, but still preserving the identity of our region.
So, as a final question to you, you spoke about the future. So you obviously have started working with your dad now quite a while, and slowly but surely you took over the estate, the running of the estate. But I don't know. I always remember Istvan Sepsi Jr. saying that, you know, until my father is alive, I will always work for my father, no matter what. So how is this generation passing on to the new generation with your sister and yourself? How does it work? I know it's very harmonious, but it would be really nice to hear from you about it.
Well, it's true. Well, Sepsi is besides being a fantastic producer, they're good friends as well, and we also find a lot of similarities between us and them on that matter because it's true. It's the same. Well, Domingos, like Eastern Senior, is well, is he well, he's one of the pioneers of this region, and he did so much, and he's still doing so much for the region and for us in particular, and he loves it. And so for everybody, so not only for me and for all the family that is now helping, he's an inspiration. And so to all the team, so to have him around, it's extraordinary. And it's true that well, it's he's the boss. He's always the big boss, and he's always be and in terms of winemaking, true that he passed a lot of that responsibility to me over the years, and it was something that it was also very natural and progressive. So it wasn't from one day to the other. I learned so much. I'm always learning so much with him, but it was something that happened in more than 10 years of working together. And again, he's an inspiration. So it will be fantastic to have him side by side with me for many years to come, and he'll always be the big boss, the big inspiration, and most of all, a fantastic father.
All right. Well, long they live. That's all I have to say. Long may they live. Well, listen, thank you very much, Tiago, and looking forward to catching up with you later.